What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the Week 15 NFL Power Rankings show. The NFL gave us a lot to talk about this week. I'm excited for this one. We got backup quarterbacks thriving, changing the narrative on some of these teams who lost their starters. And just some upsets. Going to be a really fun week, a lot of movement. Please do hit that like button before we get started. It takes just a second. It's the best and freest way to support my channel. I really appreciate it. And make sure you're subscribed for more NFL content just around the corner. But let's go ahead and get started. At the bottom, we have the Carolina Panthers in their own tier of sadness this week. And I'm titling this tier, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. No, we're going full on, I'm mad and disappointed in the Carolina Panthers. Not just the offense and Bryce Young continuing their struggles, but dude, you've got Shy Tuttle jumping off sides on a critical fourth down in this game on the least convincing dummy snap count ever from Derek Carr. They clearly were not going for it, and Shy Tuttle, who's a 7-year vet, jumps off sides. How does that happen? You've got a block punt return for a touchdown. This team is completely broken, and they are very clearly in their own tier of badness, even though they're only a 3-point underdog against the Falcons this week. It goes to show you everything you need to know about the NFC South. But let's jump up to our next tier, our fifth tier, and I'm just going to title this the potentially frisky teams. Unserious teams that are capable of pulling off upsets and beating other average teams. And that's what we saw from the number 31 ranked New England Patriots, who hold on to the number 31 spot, but are no longer in the most bottom tier in my rankings. Look, they figured out some things with the offense with Bailey Zappi and throwing the ball to their running back and tight end, and they beat Mitch Trubisky with some defensive plays. I mean, good for you guys, maybe. Now putting yourself in less of a chance to get the number one pick and get a franchise quarterback, though they didn't blow that entirely. They still have the number 2 pick right now, but, am I going to freak out over that Thursday night victory? No, I'm not. We'll see where it goes moving forward. Then we had the Washington Commanders at number 30, who were on bye this week. Not much to really add, although they are losing 5 spots, as a lot of the teams that were ranked below them showed a lot more this week than the Commanders have really over the last month. They are trending towards being truly one of the worst teams in the league, even though Sam Howell remains interesting, snap in, snap out. Then we got the Las Vegas Raiders at number 29. The Aiden O'Connell experiment resulted in just 0 points for the offense this week. Look, Max Crosby's insane. I'll give you that. The team is trying and competing, and they clearly were frisky against the Vikings, but you score 0 points, you're probably going to come down in the power rankings. Then at number 28, we got the Arizona Cardinals. Just a couple other teams with better records, impressing in other ways, so the Cardinals are going to drop 2 spots, though I continue to cheer for this team and Kyler Murray and company. Then we got the Tennessee Titans at number 27. I think a lot of people curious, how much were they going to rise here after storming back and upsetting the Miami Dolphins this week? I mean that was impressive, right? That was a classic Mike Vrabel, gritty performance, dig deep, and never give up. They really brought it offensively in this game, and this was a big statement by Will Levis, who I've been a big fan of and a proponent of his game, and very clearly, he's playing at a level where, he's going to throw some haymakers. He's exciting. He's making plays with his feet. He's going to keep them in games. And if they're able to put up 20 plus points every week, that's going to very quickly change how we feel about the Titans this year, obviously, but especially more importantly into the future. They do seem to have their quarterback of the future. And for Titans fans, that's really all that matters right now. And then we've got the New York Jets at number 26, who remain kind of the hardest team to sort of rank here because, we know this team is going to be able to hang in pretty much any game because of this defense. And then you have Zach Wilson coming in and playing like that. And in terms of ranking them moving forward, that alone is difficult because forget their playoff standings for a second. If that happens to be the Zach Wilson we get every week, this is anywhere from the 12th to 15th best team in the league. Like, he looked legitimately good, just as he did in that small stretch earlier. But what we know about Zach Wilson and his career is we just don't know if and how he can sustain that. But this was, in a lot of ways, a frustrating win for the New York Jets because it was a too little, too late performance. And you're looking at Zach Wilson playing, and I think we all kind of felt this way for the most part when they benched him and put in Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian. Like, look, I get Zach Wilson has had his frustrations, and you're kind of saying, give us anybody but Zach at this point. But if Zach Wilson was playing the last 2-3 weeks, do they not win one or two of those games and keep this season alive and perpetuate this hope that Aaron Rodgers could have come back? I think you got to raise questions again about how they've managed this quarterback situation, which is just crazy. Because at first it was like, how did you not have a better backup than Zach Wilson? But then it was like, why did you go to those horrible backups when they clearly weren't as good as Zach Wilson? So I'm actually frustrated with the Jets in a week where they dominated, right? So they're clearly looking up in terms of the rest of the season, but for what? But then we have the other New Jersey team here. How about Tommy Cutlets and the New York Giants, baby? Brian Daboll bringing out the magic again as well. Like, coach of the year last year, turning chicken shit into chicken cutlets this year. It's fun, man. They're 5-8. They're not out of the playoffs, which is just hilarious. That's a big win against the Green Bay Packers as a touchdown underdog. Both phases, too. Like, other than special teams that were horrible for the Giants, a fumbled punt, missed field goal. But it's kind of funny. Both teams had a fumbled punt and a missed field goal in that game. You don't see that too often. But anyway, the defense has been underrated all year. You just haven't felt it necessarily because the offense was so laughable for the first 12 weeks of the season. In fact, 3 weeks ago, I didn't even rank the New York Giants. I had them demoted to college football, ranking the Georgia Bulldogs at 32. Well, since then, I guess I cursed this into giving the Giants the Georgia Bulldogs' powers, because Georgia didn't even make the college football playoffs. And the Giants, who knows, man? Who knows? You got Tommy DeVito not making mistakes, making plays with his feet, making one or two big throws every week. They're getting guys like, Higgins and Wandale playing well. Maybe they can, get Darren Waller back. I don't know. The offensive line's been so much better the last few weeks. Just all around, so good to see. Even if, speaking the P word, talking about playoffs is pretty crazy for the Giants still. But even if that doesn't become a reality, you're just, I think as a Giants fan, taking a huge, deep sigh of relief because, there were people in the first 4 weeks of the season asking me if Brian Daboll is a fraud and if last year was a fluke. And I'm happy to say, like, I stood my ground. I was like, no, like, he's going to probably get this thing turned around. And the second they figured out some adequate answers on the offensive line, this thing has turned around very nicely. So Daboll, to me, continues to impress, reminding us that he is one of the premium head coaches in the league. So a lot of good things to say about the New York Giants this week. And, if they pick up another win, they'll probably jump up a tier. I still have a lot of questions about this team, but very clearly to me at the top of the frisky tier. Now, before we get to my next tier here, which is a big one and a very fun one, I got to tell you guys about Underdog Fantasy that has truly helped me get through this interesting NFL season where we've had countless primetime matchups of backup quarterbacks against backup quarterbacks. Last week was another one with Trubisky against the Patriots. And, Underdog just keeps you invested in these games, if nothing else. I was sweating that thing out. I had hit 3 of my 4 picks and was waiting to see if Deontay Johnson was going to get his receptions in a horrible football game. And I'm sure you guys have all seen the Underdog lineups, what their pick'em contests are. You're putting together player lineups, anything from, passing yards to rushing yards to fantasy points. And if you hit on all of your picks, if you want to go up to 5 selections, that's up to 20 times your money back in these things. But even when you don't win, you are winning, because $2 to keep you interested in a Thursday night game like Steelers Patriots, or this Thursday we've got Raiders against a potentially Justin Herbertless Chargers. That's worth it to me at least, and I think you guys will enjoy Underdog quite a bit if you're not playing. And maybe most importantly, if you sign up right now using promo code TFG, you'll support my channel in a big way, and they will match your first deposit up to $100. That is easily a season's worth of Pick'em contests to gear up for next year right there. So that's promo code TFG at Underdog Fantasy. And let's get to my next tier here. And backed by popular demand, Schrodinger's Box of Cats tier makes its comeback finally here in week 15. And for those that are new to the channel or missed this last year, this is a reference to the Austrian physicist Schrodinger, who had this theory that had to do with basically putting cats in a box, and then there was a contraption that, based on whatever happened, it may or may not kill the cats that are in the box. And at the end of the day, the theory here is that the cats inside of this box are neither dead or alive in terms of what their living state is. So all of the teams in this tier, and there's a lot of them, we've got 11 teams in Schrodinger's Box of Cats this week. These are teams that are neither dead or alive. Teams that are not serious Super Bowl contenders. Some, by nature of their standings, maybe what they did earlier the year, or how bad their conference or divisions are, may or may not be playoff teams. But what's inside the box, what these teams are going to be the rest of the year, man, you tell me. And I will tell you, all of these 11 teams, this is why we do tiers, because sorting these teams was incredibly difficult. I'm going to give it my best crack here. Teams 24 all the way up to 14. So we've got the Minnesota Vikings at the bottom of this tier, who I almost said lost to the Raiders, but they did actually win that game after kicking a field goal to go up 3-0. The best stat of the week is that the Vikings won 3-0 on the same day that the Minnesota Wild won 3-0. Shout out to my guys over at 10,000 Takes for seeing that tweet there. But yeah, I don't know what to make of this team. Clearly, they have a quarterback problem. Josh Dobbs has completely fallen off a cliff. They had to put in Nick Mullins to get a field goal out of this game. That's a problem. I think they clearly have the worst offense right now out of all the teams in this tier, and that's clearly an issue. Now, they might have one of the better defenses in this tier, and can they continue to win games 10-6 and all this? You know, it's very reminiscent of some of those Brian Flores Dolphins teams back in the day. So I continue to give a huge nod and tip of the cap to Brian Flores for what he's doing there. But is this sustainable? Can they keep it up? I would bet against it. I actually have the Chicago Bears at 5-8, a spot above the Vikings, which I think is fair because the Bears went into Minnesota and beat them just last week. And then the Bears turn around and beat Detroit this week, even though Detroit might not be quite what we thought they were. But the Bears are, I guess, maybe who we thought they were, or aren't who we thought they were. I don't know. I'm trying to get the soundbite reference in there. But either way, this team is impressing me in every phase. I mean, I've been talking for weeks now about Matt Eberflus's defense and how they've come along, and comparing them to kind of Robert Saleh's Jets in a lot of ways, where, you know, Saleh for the first 20 games of his time in New York was failing as the defensive coach. First 20 games of Matt Eberflus, he was failing, but very clearly they have figured things out, and they've been very solid on that side of the ball. For all the Bears fans dreaming of Matt Eberflus getting fired, you can kiss that goodbye. He will be back, and I think that's a good thing for the Bears. I think he's a very good defensive coach. Loved the hire when they made it, and I think he's establishing himself again as that here in Chicago. But then you look at the offense and them coming alive. Now, I don't want to go overboard here, because just a week ago I was really unimpressed by Justin Fields in Minnesota. But this week against Detroit, Justin Fields played one of the best games of his career, just dealing, throwing dimes down the field, using his legs at the right times. How could you not be impressed by what Justin Fields showed there? I still think they're trending towards drafting a quarterback, resetting that quarterback contract. But if Fields is playing like that every week, and that's a big if, but if he is, maybe you turn that number one pick into a bunch of other picks, or Marvin Harrison or something else, and you're really looking at this team with a heating up defense and a really nice surrounding roster, and saying they are really turning a corner here. So they're definitely fascinating. They're only 3-point underdogs against the Cleveland Browns this week, and they're not out of the playoff picture either. So the Bears are very fascinating. A great week for the Bears. And then after the Bears, all three NFC South teams, 22, 21, 20. I order it Saints, Falcons, Bucks, but you guys can have at it in the comments there. It infuriates me that one of these teams is by default going to get a playoff spot because no one seems to want it. The Saints scrap by against the Panthers, win a bunch of points late. The Falcons lose to the Bucks. Desmond Ridder, I thought, mostly looked like crap again with a couple big plays in there. And then the Bucks might win this division by default of just having an average defense and an average offense. I will say they got their run game going this week, which is a huge difference maker. They've got a huge game against Green Bay this week. So, that's your NFC South analysis. These teams are infuriating and difficult to talk about on a week-to-week basis. But then at number 19, talk about the true definition of a Schrodinger's cat. The LA Chargers, like neither dead or alive. Certainly not alive in terms of like playoff standings or anything like that, but any given week, they aren't dead. Like they can turn it on offensively, and even the last month, they've had some good defensive games, which just makes it even more frustrating. It's like I'd rather Herbert looks great and Brandon Staley's defense falters. This week, the injury bugs show back up for the Chargers, where Justin Herbert bangs up his finger, might miss Thursday Night Football here. Like just classic Chargers bad luck. Sounds like an injury that maybe if the game was on Sunday, he would play, but because it's Thursday, he might not. That's all I got, Chargers. We're just wondering who's coaching this team next year is where I'm at with the Chargers, and it's probably not going to change the rest of the year. Then we got the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 18. They're going to drop down a tier out of the playoff caliber tier. Too many bad losses in a row. I think they are, and we've said this before, but I think they are at risk of Mike Tomlin finally finishing with a losing record after, sprinkling magic dust on this team in the first half of the year. But they might be running out of pixie dust, man. Like this team has no flight in them. This offense, clearly their issues extend beyond Matt Canada. Now, obviously, Mitch Trubisky is not the answer. But anytime you have a team booing in an effort to get Mason Rudolph on the field, like that tells you where this team is at offensively. Now, they're still the team that, can fight back against a Patriots team and make it close in the end, or, get a bunch of defensive turnovers and win random games in BS ways. But this is not a playoff caliber football team as maybe I would have said about them 3 weeks ago. And even Kenny Pickett, who is going to continue to miss time, I think, even when he comes back, I don't think he's the answer necessarily either. So the Steelers are definitely trending in the wrong direction, even if they're, still a potential playoff team and a tough out every week. Then I've got the Indianapolis Colts, just kind of laid a stinker this week against the Bengals, and it adds a little, when you get this extra hindsight, you can look back a week and say, well, it turns out, if they didn't have 2 blocked punts, they might lose to the Tennessee Titans, and that's 2 bad losses in a row. I still like the Colts. I think Shane Steichen is an incredible play caller, and their RPO offense is setting up to be brilliant, potentially with Anthony Richardson next year, and Gardner Minshew's competing, but some of their issues in the secondary really showed up this week going against those Bengals receivers. Their defense isn't overly reliable. Their offense is certainly not reliable. It's impressive that they've gotten to 7-6, but, probably was a little eager to say this was a playoff caliber team last week. They had to come down out of that tier, although their overall ranking is going to stay the same. They're still my 17th ranked team. It's just my overall perception of them has dropped down a little bit. Then we have the Cincinnati Bengals, and I mentioned it at the top of the show. We've got some backup quarterbacks that really have opened my mind about some of these teams this year, and the Cincinnati Bengals have really piqued my interest with Jake Browning here. You're looking at a quarterback that has been in this system now for multiple years. He has a skill set that is in the same archetype of Joe Burrow, in that he is a quarterback that has really had to learn the game the right way because he doesn't have this rocket arm. So you do see a quarterback that plays on time and gets the ball out and can play point guard and do a little bit with his feet. But you plug him into that offense and you get the screen game going and you get Trey Hendrickson healthy, and this defense that I've been saying for over a year now is underratedly the identity in a lot of ways of this team, and some of their deep playoff runs was really this defense with Lou Anarumo and these underrated star players holding opponents to 20, 22 points. And can this team get through games against good teams with Jake Browning winning 23-20 at this point, or 20-17? I think it's possible. I mean, Browning is really playing well, and if he can sustain that for another couple of weeks, where I'm getting at with this is, could this be like a Nick Foles-esque playoff run type of team with the Bengals? Because I do think the rest of the team, this was my preseason Super Bowl pick, and maybe I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid because of that and trying to confirm my priors, but they were my pick because of all of the talent and the great coaching that this team has. I'm interested, man. I don't think there's a clear favorite in the AFC right now. Certainly not a runaway favorite. And I think the Bengals can hang in there against anybody. And, they got another test this week against the Vikings, but it's going to be a Jake Browning revenge game. And this team could get to 8-6 and, maybe even enter that playoff caliber group again. The Bengals are, to me, the most fascinating team this week from this tier. But then we have the Seattle Seahawks, who it's time to knock them down another tier. And then we have the Seattle Seahawks at number 15, and I'm dropping them down into this tier because I really think they are a Schrodinger's cat. They are neither dead or alive. We know what this team can do offensively any given week and the explosiveness that they have on that side of the ball. But this defense, dude, where is this going under Pete Carroll and Clint Hurt under him and this assembly of talent that can't get after it any given Sunday? It's just incredibly frustrating. And then you have inconsistency problems on offense as well. Maybe this team can come out of Monday Night Football, probably not with a loss, but at least head into the final stretch of 3 games and sneak back into the playoffs. But then what, right? Where is this team truly going? They are missing way too much to me to be viewed as a playoff caliber team, and that's why we got to drop them down a tier. As with the Green Bay Packers, who had a really just unfortunate night against the Giants, where all of the things that were looking so great for them in the last month, where they had completely turned their season around, the defense was playing great, Jordan Love was playing great, the receivers were playing great, all of it just came screaming back to earth against the New York Giants. Now, I don't think it has to be all doom and gloom. I still think they have a good chance with their upcoming schedule to be one of these NFC wildcard teams. But certainly frustrating to see Jordan Love's accuracy issues show back up in the first half of this game. And the Joe Barry issues too. Of course, last week on the Fully Inflated Football podcast, I finally caved and was like, hey, maybe Joe Barry's not doing that bad of a job. And then they can't stop, Tommy DeVito and the New York Giants. And it's, Jordan Love comes back, actually had a pretty solid second half. You get gifted the Saquon fumble, and they get a go-ahead touchdown late in the game. It's like, okay, Joe Barry, all you have to do is stop the New York Giants and Tommy DeVito from getting 40 yards to get in field goal range. And he comes out and freaking prevent defense until they're inside the 50. It's like, really, that's the game plan against Tommy DeVito and the Giants, is prevent D. Great vintage Joe Barry moment there. And he's going to be back next year, and that's as frustrating as anything for the Green Bay Packers. But, I still think Christian Watson out, Aaron Jones out, Jair Alexander out, Eric Stokes out. Those guys could very well be back next week, and this team could get hot again, but very much a reality check for the Green Bay Packers this week. Now, as we climb up to the playoff caliber tier, which are teams that I think are just any given year, forget that record for a second. These are teams that are deserving of a playoff spot and can compete, maybe win a playoff game, but not serious Super Bowl contenders. I am going to keep the LA Rams in this tier, who, like Seattle, like Green Bay, like Pittsburgh, did lose this week, but in much more reassuring fashion. I mean, they were really punch for punch with the Baltimore Ravens all game long, and they end up losing on a punt return touchdown in overtime. I walk away impressed by the Rams in this game. I think their defense is still frisky. I really do. Aaron Donald is still Aaron Donald in so many ways. Witherspoon on the back end, what a great pickup he's been, and all these rookies, Kobe Turner and not a rookie, but Ernest Jones. Like, they have a frisky defense, but what they're doing offensively, they're just legitimately one of the 5 best offenses, maybe 8 best offenses in the league. Stafford's playing great. You're reminded this week that Cooper Kupp is such a big part of this offense. Puka Nacua, the run game with Kyren Williams. Look, the Rams to me are the best of the rest in the NFC. Like, I think they are very clearly a playoff caliber team when Stafford is healthy. Like, they lost 3 games when Stafford was hurt, right? So you got to factor that into who the Rams are now. And I was impressed by them, even though they lost to the Ravens. But they are going to be challenged to make the playoffs because they still have to play the Niners. And they're going to probably have to win all 3 of their other games because I don't expect them to beat the Niners. But I do think they still belong in the playoff caliber tier. Then we got the Houston Texans. Tough to know necessarily what to do with them. Obviously they lost Tank Dell last week, and then Nico Collins has an injury that we're not very clear on his timeline here. I mean, you take Nico Collins and Tank Dell off this offense, and there's only so much CJ Stroud can do, especially when they go against the Jets. Like, I picked the Jets to win this week because it was going to be such a tough matchup there. It was also rainy. So, I do think the offense has better days ahead. But, those are... We've talked so much about how great Stroud has been, and he has been great. But it has overshadowed how great Nico Collins and Tank Dell have also been. So you take them out of the picture, and this offense is much more average to mediocre, even, as it was this week. And then the defense is just imperfect. They have holes. They have spottiness. They're a young defense with their defensive coach in his first year. So they are a tough team to know what to do with. They clearly did not look good this week in a tough matchup for them. But can they get Nico back? Can they get things going again and recapture some of their momentum that has been impressive this year? But I am going to have them below the Denver Broncos, who they did just beat a week ago. But you rip Tank Dell out of the situation there, who got hurt in the second half of that game. And, I think the Broncos, pound for pound right now, are slightly better than the Houston Texans, though it's close. But anyway, the Broncos win this week against the Chargers, kind of doing more of the same, scrappy defense, good run game, Russ making some plays. They're hanging around, man. They're probably not going to win the Super Bowl this year. It's why they're in this tier, but you got to just continue to be impressed by their ability to basically streamline this thing and turn into a very above average football team after what they looked like to start the season. And then Detroit at number 10, who continue to fall. And at this point, we're wondering, when is this landslide going to come to a screeching halt? Because you've now had some really ugly losses in the last, 2 months of the season. Losing to the Bears now, losing to the Packers. They got just completely blown out by the Ravens. You're definitely feeling their defense is a clear issue. It's Aiden Hutchinson and nobody else on that defense. That was a concern coming into the year. And then Jared Goff is just not elevating this team at all. They're still a very good offense that I expect to have better days ahead. But man, where are the Detroit Lions right now? Are they even the best team in the NFC North right now? Like, record-wise, obviously, but you've had Chicago and Green Bay trending in the right direction. They've both whooped your ass in the last few weeks. This has really been a disappointment for Detroit based on how they started the year. And it's like, you expect them to finish this division and, dig deep and finish strong. But, man, they got a tough game against Denver this week. Are they going to beat the Broncos this week? We'll see where this goes, man. Then we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who I am going to drop down out of the Super Bowl potential tier, Jags fans. I'm sorry. The main reason I'm coming to this conclusion is, number one, the offensive line is beat up and they've got issues there. But on top of that, it's one thing if you're in week 3 and Lawrence and Ridley can't get on the same page, and you've got all these miscommunications that lead to, third down missed throws, and in the case of this week against the Browns, like third down interception or just miscommunication interceptions where both of Trevor Lawrence's picks this week, the receiver wasn't where Trevor was expecting him to be. It's one thing if that's happening week 3, but when it happens week 3 and week 4 and week 5 and week 6 and week 7 and week 8 and week 10 and week 13 and week 14 again and again and again and again, I can't count on them to clean this up heading into the playoffs. So you pair that with the O-line, the fact that the pass rush is Josh Allen or bust. They're very similar to the Jags in that, the Lions in that way, except the Jags have a secondary. Yeah, they're just a good football team that I just can't really see winning the Super Bowl at this point. And then the Cleveland Browns at number 8, at the top of this tier, but piquing my interest to potentially get back up into that Super Bowl tier. Two big things here. Number 1, Myles Garrett's healthy. Myles Garrett looked back this week, going to work against the Jags. And I think what we've seen is when Myles Garrett's out there, this is a generational type of defense. So that's big, right? We didn't know if and when that was going to happen this year after he got hurt a couple weeks ago. You look at how he was a week ago against, I can't remember who their opponent was just a week ago, but clearly Myles Garrett wasn't the game wrecker then. He looked much more back this week. But also this Joe Flacco thing is piquing my interest because he's got a chemistry with a guy like Elijah Moore. They're implementing that into the offense. Something I talked about as well on the podcast last week was if I'm Kevin Stefanski, I said I would be drawing up ways to get David Njoku like 10 plus targets because he has been a dynamic weapon for them, but they just have, I think, underutilized him. And I doubt Kevin Stefanski listens to the pod, but he is a smart coach and had the same thought. And they had like 8 targets for David Njoku in the first half. He's dynamic. So he's like a complement to the run game with his run after the catch. You bring in Flacco, who I honestly think has given them the best quarterback play they've had since they traded for Deshaun Watson. And that changes everything. His ball velocity looks honestly insane. Like Joe Flacco, we knew he had a strong arm just based on his career, but very quickly have been reminded like this dude's got elite arm talent and he opens up the offense vertically a little bit. It's in an offense that loves to draw up play action shots. He is making a couple mistakes every week where, it's just he's not always on the same page with the offense or he's forcing things a little bit uncomfortable. So that's what you got to look out for. But the talent's there with Flacco at 38 years old, and he's playing really solid quarterback play for them, which, as we know, is all they really need to be a Super Bowl team. So if he comes out and it's weird to say looks good against a good Bears defense this week, but that's really where we're at with the Bears. The Browns very well might climb up a tier and be a team that I could see maybe, with Flacco, who's got a record of doing this in the playoffs, maybe they could be a Cinderella team this year. I don't know, maybe getting a step ahead of myself there, but really impressed by the Cleveland Browns this week. But let's jump up to the Super Bowl potential tier. We have 7 teams remaining that I can actually envision winning the Super Bowl. And the Miami Dolphins are still going to sneak in here. But I do think this week was another case for the Tyreek Hill MVP candidate thing. And it was not because he had an incredible game. It was because of what happened to the offense after he went out, where Tua is making mistakes and just isn't really able to elevate the offense beyond what Tyreek Hill is bringing to the table. And I think that was pretty evident this week. And also just this defense without Jalen Phillips, they need this offense to be elite as it was the week before with a healthy Tyreek. So I don't think it's a significant injury for Tyreek Hill. I think that was a big part of them blowing this game to the Titans. And you have to consider that, Tua is their quarterback, and that's why they're at the bottom of the Super Bowl potential tier. But do I think they have better games ahead? I do. And, they still were up 14 with like 4 minutes to go in that game. So it's not like it was the most ugly performance by the Dolphins either. But they are going to drop down a spot here. But then at number 6, the Kansas City Chiefs, And look, can I still see this team figuring out their issues and playing great defense and Mahomes being Mahomes in the playoffs and this team gets through the AFC and gets to the Super Bowl? Yeah, absolutely. That's why they're in this tier, but they have a very clear issue with these wide receivers, and it's something new every week. It's not just drops. It's like, miscommunications with the Sky Moore pick last week against Green Bay, or Kadarius Toney lining up offsides. Look, I would get Kadarius Toney off the team. That's my take here. You got 4 weeks to fix this thing. You send a message to the locker room like, we're not going to just settle for these mental mistakes when they happen over and over again. Not just send a message, but get him off the team, because he is a mental mistake waiting to happen. He's a big third down target in a drop, or lining up offsides, or a fumble, or you name it, a holding call. Like, this dude, is capable of making any kind of mistake at any given moment. He's a ticking time bomb in terms of costing you games. Get him off the squad at this point. Honestly, I don't care how good he is after the catch. You got plenty of those guys, Yeah, the Chiefs are frustrating, man. I think they, as I said, are still capable of winning the Super Bowl this year. But they're capable of losing it at any given moment, too, against really anybody. But then the Buffalo Bills at number 5, who took care of business against the Chiefs, even with the chaotic ending. But, I mean, look, Josh Allen, at the end of the day, is playing the best quarterbacking in the NFL. I mean, maybe Dak, but certainly in the AFC. Give me Josh Allen over anybody right now. Now, he has more reliable weapons than Patrick Mahomes. If you could switch spots, sure. But with the level of play that they're getting from their quarterback, paired with a defense that still does feel well coached, even though I'm not the biggest McDermott guy. I mean, they're also they have much more of an identity offensively. I love the way they're getting James Cook involved, who's kind of blossoming into a superstar running back before our eyes this year, onto the radar. But, there's a reason Vegas loves this team. They were just a 1-point underdog in Kansas City, despite their record being way worse, and they won, right? So, that's where the Bills are at. If they can get into the dance, and they have another really tough test this week against Dallas, but if they can get into the dance, they absolutely could burn through the AFC and get to the Super Bowl this year. 100%. There's not a doubt in my mind about that. But they got to get in. Then we got the Philadelphia Eagles at number 4, dropping down 2 spots this week. And they have holes, man. The team that we felt like was foolproof, even though some of these issues were there before our eyes, but they were winning some of these games late and squeaking out some of these wins. But, they have issues up and down the board. And I will spoil, not long after this video goes live, I'm going to be posting my live show with Matthew Collar, the Hot Routes live show, which I encourage any and all of you to subscribe to every Tuesday here on the channel at 5 o'clock. We break down 5 heavy-hitting topics every week. One of them is diving into the Cowboys and the Eagles. So because that content is coming up on the channel in just a second, I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I really encourage you guys to check out that show here. Again, shortly coming to the channel, but they got offensive issues. I think they're missing Shane Steichen. I think Jalen Hurts has some flaws as a quarterback. He's not healthy. He's not bringing everything to the table as a runner as he was, but especially this defense is just not the same. This D-line is good, but it's better on paper than it is in reality. Jalen Carter was crowned a superstar right away, but hasn't been close to a superstar since week 7 when he started facing real offensive lines. Their secondary is a mess. I don't love their defensive coaching. They have a lot of issues. They have a ton of talent and are capable of beating anybody. But, those issues have come to the forefront and have cost them games. They've now been blown out by the Dallas Cowboys. They are the opposite of getting hot and healthy at the right time, which is what you want to see with these teams. But at number 3, I am going to put the Ravens just ever so slightly ahead of the Eagles. It's tough. I think they're very close, but you got to be impressed with how Lamar is playing this year. He hasn't been foolproof. He's not my MVP pick or anything like that, but anything short of that, him in this offense has been so impressive. I think he was totally locked in the second half against the Rams. That's a big reason they won that game. And they're making it work offensively with Mark Andrews out. Odell is playing great. Some big plays this week again. Zay Flowers looks awesome. And this is a big Todd Monken week as well. They had some really good scripted plays earlier in this game to attack certain match zone coverages that they were anticipating from the Rams. So it's good to see some of the scheming elements get brought to the table offensively, because obviously defensively, their scheming has been as good as anybody in the league. Not their best week of defense. I still wish they had another superstar up front instead of just a bunch of B-level players. I wish they had an A-level guy. And that's kind of Philadelphia's problem too, by the way. Like, can they really just rush with 4 and consistently win and dominate like some of these top teams can? I don't think so. But either way, the Ravens are very complete and are going to come in again here as the top-ranked AFC team in a position here to get that 1 seed, which I think is going to be super important in the AFC, because I think a lot of these teams are very, very close. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I think a lot of people are curious if the Cowboys are going to be up there with the 49ers in a tier of their own. And I think it's kind of turned into a 1A, 1B situation. The reason the Cowboys aren't up there in the exact same tier as the Niners is because of what happened when these teams met head-to-head, when the Niners killed the Dallas Cowboys. And that's even maybe more a stronger case for why the Niners are up there. But I am going to just kind of slide the Cowboys up because I think the Cowboys have separated themselves from all of the teams in the Super Bowl potential tier. And it feels like we're destined at this point for a rematch between the Niners and the Cowboys. And, that matchup is very interesting. And I'll just reveal the Niners at number 1. They're awesome. They're dominant. They killed the Seahawks again, blah, blah, blah. But that matchup's going to be very interesting because both these teams, I think, are similar in their play style in that when they get a lead with their defenses, with their pass rushes, if they get that game script where teams have to pass to come from behind, these guys are ass kickers and they thrive in that environment. And both these teams, likewise, offensively, can really put the pedal down and keep you on your back foot there. But obviously, in that first matchup, the Cowboys, for one reason or another, were the team that fell behind. What if that flipped? What if the Niners happened to have a fumble or a batted pass that got them from behind? Could the Cowboys not equally flip that game script on the Niners' head? It's just a thought and something to keep in mind. When these two teams play, I absolutely would love to win that coin toss and take the ball first. I'll say that because it's a very unique situation with these types of teams. But again, I am going to have the Cowboys kind of in a tier of their own in a sense, ahead of everybody else in the league, but the Niners truly in a tier of their own ahead of all of those other teams. So things are shaping up and also adding more and more confusion with some of the backups and some of these teams tapering off or getting upset this week. But very fascinating week nonetheless. Sorry for the raspy voice. I'm dealing with a cold here this week. But I do hope you guys appreciated the rankings this week. Please do hit that like button if you did. Make sure you subscribe. Come back here at 6 o'clock Eastern for my live show with Matthew Collar. And let me know in the comments down below where you agree, where you disagree. We'll see you later. Peace out.